Hi, I'm Kris Bertin,
And I'm Alex Forbes, and we are the creators of The Secret of the Saucer, the third installment of the Hobtown Mystery Stories.
and you're listening to True North Country Comics podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics podcast, dedicated to celebrate Canadian comic book and graphic novel creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. On this episode, I chat with Kris Bertin and Alex Forbes about their new graphic novel, Hobtown Mystery Stories, The Secret of the Saucer, published by Oni Press. Please like and subscribe to this website by hitting the subscribe button, so you'll be notified about new podcast interviews and article posts. This podcast is available wherever podcasts are enjoyed. Please like, follow, and subscribe. Kris Bertin is a writer from Halifax, Nova Scotia. His first book of short stories, Bad Things Happen, won the Writers' Union of Canada's 2017 Danuta Gleed Award and the ReLit Award for short fiction. He's had his work featured in the Walrus, the Malahat Review, TNQ, PRISM International, and the Journey Prize Anthology, Oberon's Coming Attractions, and more. He's also a two-time winner of the Jack Hodgins Founders Award for fiction. Kris and his frequent screenwriting partner Naben Ruthnum have projects in development with Oddfellows Entertainment. Alex Forbes is an artist and graduate of the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design. He's a co-creator and cartoonist of The Case of the Missing Men from 2017 and The Cursed Hermit from 2019, both originally published by Conundrum Press. Both books were nominated for the Doug Wright Awards. Together, Kris and Alex have produced the new graphic novel, Hobtown Mystery Stories, The Secret of the Saucer. In Hobtown Mystery Stories, The Secret of the Saucer, the story goes like this. The lines between conspiracy and reality become intertwined like never before during the town's highly contested mayoral election. There's arrival of an unexplained, unidentified flying object, a chaotic and unhinged ape lord, and an outbreak of literal backward thinking. The high school teen detective club should be at the forefront of the case, but is rife with conflict and its own crisis of leadership as the sleuths become increasingly paranoid. Is there anyone they can trust? So without further ado, here's my chat with Kris Bertin and Alex Forbes about their new graphic novel, Hobtown Mystery Stories, The Secret of the Saucer. So Kris Bertin and Alex Forbes, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Thanks for having us.
We miss you.
Well, I appreciate your time. Before we get going into all the questions, I would like to know, what are you reading today? And maybe I'll ask Kris to go first.
I read really boring stuff. I read a lot of history. I'm obsessed with Robert Caro and the years of Lyndon Johnson and things like that. What I'm reading right now is Quinn Sladobian's Crack Up Capitalism, which, sounds like it's pretty lame, but it's about the way... Sorry, am I supposed to say an answer about comic books? Because this is not about comic
No,
books.
whatever. It could be like bubblegum wrappers, whatever you like.
Oh, good.
Cereal boxes,
Good.
whatever.
Good. It's about the way that people all over the world right now are not interested in democracy and trying to find new avenues for money to flow through different countries like Singapore and Hong Kong, and sort of the Elon Musk, Peter Thiel people who are like, let's build a new monarchy with me at the top. It's so fascinating. And it informs a lot of what I'm interested in as a writer, which is like, what do they have in store for us?
Very good. How about you, Alex? What are you reading today?
I am reading comics because kind of when I'm between books is the only time I really read a lot of comics. I find when I'm in the throes of drawing, I find it harder to enjoy comics without narcissistically comparing them to myself or whatever. I just read Blood of the Virgin by Sammy Harcum. I met Sammy not long ago in Los Angeles. I went there for the first time and hit it off with him, and I became very interested in what kind of thing he would make. And it was a really beautiful story, kind of like 1970s Hollywood, and I really enjoyed it.
Very good. Now, although it feels like deja vu, and that's an underline right there, because Kris, you talked about this story we're going to talk about right now in 2020 in our interview, and Alex, you mentioned it at the Dartmouth Comic Arts Festival. So basically, I'd like to ask you both about your new graphic novel, Hobtown Mystery Stories, The Secret of the Saucer. And maybe, Kris, I could ask you to describe it
Yeah, well, but hopefully they know who the characters are. If not, I would say Hobtown Mystery Stories is a big mashup of everything that we love. So Alex and I love pulp stories like Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys and Tom Swift. We took all of that and we rolled it into a ball with all the maritime folklore from our region. And I guess what did we do after that? We hit it with a hammer and
Yeah.
and smoothed it out as best we could. But it's jagged and strange and surreal and funny. They describe it, they meaning publicists and reviewers, as something like Twin Peaks meets Scooby Doo or something like that. But that's what Hobtown is. It's a group of friends who are trying to uncover the mysteries of their town, and they're weirder and stranger every time they tackle them. In this one, Dana Nance, who's kind of our Nancy Drew, is experiencing almost like an out of body, out of time experience where she is understanding everything backwards. And so that's how we get the reader to understand the story is we start at the end and we work our way forward to the beginning. And if that's not confusing enough, one of the characters is a psychic, so she can also experience the story out of order, which it's maybe our most ambitious story from the writer's point of view. It took a lot of work to make it, but the story is backwards, kind of like Memento or something like that.
All right, that's something for sure. Alex, even though you, along with Kris, created the previous two Hobtown graphic novels, I wanted to ask you how you approach The Secret of the Saucer differently.
Well, there's sort of like a practical thing where I drew this one mostly digitally, actually, which I never thought I would do in the past. I've kind of slowly relinquished a lot of my kind of fine art sensibilities and finally drew a lot of it on a tablet. For this one, it made sense to because it's so very detailed. It's very thick with information because that's sort of like a lot of the payoff in the story is seeing all these little details. If you pay attention, you see a lot of these little details that start to make sense as you continue into the past and see why different changes have happened with all these different characters and the town itself. So it made sense to do it digitally just because I was constantly going back and making little corrections and adding things and seeing things that I missed. So it just really helped me keep it all organized and make corrections and whatnot.
And because the story is backwards, you more or less drew it the right way for continuity's sake, right?
I did for a lot of it, I did for part of it anyway. For like the last chunk of it, I did do it chronologically correct, which was also interesting experiencing the story that way.
Right. Kris, you've already talked about this, and I don't want you to give away the story completely, but you've mentioned how there's a sort of reverse time going on in this book. And I wanted to ask you, like, I thought I was doing something wrong, but is there a right way or wrong way to read this book?
Early readers have said that they read it twice and they did it the way it's presented in the book, which starting at the end and working its way to the beginning, and then they read it the other way. We do our best in the story. On page one, Dana's looking at a book that is printed backwards. We start with the end instead of a chapter heading. So we do our best to try to help the audience understand, but it is an experiment. So I hope no one's too confused. I hope you weren't too confused. To me, it's the idea of let's pour mystery into the entire story so that the entire story is a mystery. You're like, where are all their friends? Why do they look different? What happened to them? And on the next chapter, you find out a tiny little bit and realize, oh, okay, that explains his hair or what have you.
We're really interested to hear from the sort of general readership when this book comes out because in the last couple of books, we heard some frustration from readers that we asked some big questions that we haven't yet answered and left some things kind of floating. We didn't explain everything, and that's the kind of story that we're interested in. This one, we might frustrate people for the opposite reason, in that we're kind of giving a lot of answers at the beginning without the questions, so you don't know why or how things have happened. You just know that they've happened. And, I think that there are some people who don't have as much patience for stories. I would recommend to people that they just kind of relax their brain and just let it happen. And one thing that Kris did quite beautifully in it is that the story is still structured as if you're reading a story that's chronologically correct. So it hits the kind of the beats that you would if you were reading the story not backwards. So it still flows quite nicely, I think, as a story and kind of like has a sort of like a build of tension and whatnot. The end of the story, which is the beginning of the story, does still kind of feel like the end of the story, which is really, I think, really fun.
So it's not an homage to a manga type story in terms of flow, right? You're not doing that deliberately.
Do you mean in terms of like reading it the other way around?
Yeah, yeah.
No,
No.
no, though
Okay.
there is stuff from manga that I do use though. I know you're not asking that, but there is like aspects of storytelling that I do like to borrow from manga.
Okay, cool. No, I appreciate that. Now, I wanted to get your feedback. I know that the first two books were originally in black and white, but definitely this one had color in it from the outset. It gave the vibe of like Hergé's Tintin, like that when I first saw the first few pages. I want to get your feedback on that. Now, color being introduced right from the get-go. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we still had a certain amount of it that was in black and white because part of this was made prior to coming over to Oni. So I think you were still using your old style, and we still do have a couple pounds of pages that are on paper, right?
Yeah.
So only parts of it were expected to be colored, and the rest of it we understood what was coming. But you worked really closely with Jason, right?
Yeah, Jason had quite a task. Again, with all of the details, all of the little super specific things that we have in mind, you know. I just had these long conversations with him over email about the color green, about like how different colors of green are. And I had to try to describe to him things that are so hard to describe for me because color is getting into this whole other level of specificity in terms of like how they feel and what they do. So it took a lot of getting used to for the process, and it was a lot of discussion.
Were there any references to existing artwork that you referred Jason to as you were going through it?
Not really, actually. More so, if I was sending him stuff, it was more so sending him actual photos of our region because Jason is from the West Coast. So his idea of a coast, was quite different. So I was sending him a lot of like, for instance, like for him, the spring is actually green. It's not here. This book takes place in March. March here is brown and yellow and at times white.
Yeah, there's some real regional differences that we had to iron out, which is something like the water. We were like, that's the water is not that pretty. We're sorry to say.
Yeah, especially in the winter months or the early spring months, it's a very dark and scary blue.
Originally, Kris, we had talked way back 5 years ago about this story sort of having an influence from the Shag Harbor UFO story. And I know that is a real place, but Hobtown is something different. When I was looking at your map in the book, it sort of gave me vibes of Lunenburg. Is that suffice to say that you melded some places together to create Hobtown for this story?
Yeah, we say it's kind of like Springfield in that it's definitely in Nova Scotia. We feel like it's in the South Shore, but when they go up to the mountain to where things get scarier, that could be South Mountain, that could be Meat Cove. So we borrow from all those different regions that have a different culture. I think too, Lunenburg is a great comparison, I think, especially downtown. So our class divide in Hobtown is people who have houses and people who don't have houses. And the people who have houses tend to have either they might have some kind of ordinary looking clapboard salt box, or they're going to have like a Second Empire or a Queen Anne style, like beautiful Victorian home like you would see in Lunenburg. But you did a lot more design work than I did.
Yeah, I would say like you're spot on for Lunenburg in the sort of the layout of the town. I get quite obsessive about it's really hard to keep it all precise if somebody's really like mapping out things that happen in the town. But I do like to have sort of a general idea of where the kids are. So I actually do think of Lunenburg in a lot of ways for the town layout. It just kind of works in my head, and it's a place that I've spent time, and it's always kind of resonated with me in terms of like the kind of town that we're thinking of that is, quite tourist friendly, but still feels kind of weird and that kind of thing. But yeah, otherwise, it is sort of like in every town. There's a little bit of Pugwash in there because I've spent time there as well. There's a little bit of Cape Breton.
And I think whenever we're in the woods, even though woods are woods, they're in New Brunswick.
Yeah.
New Brunswick woods are scarier than any other woods.
Yeah, they're deeper.
Now, Alex, you just mentioned weird, and there's definitely some shout outs to your inspirations in the story. However, at the end of the book, you referenced David Lynch. And I wanted to ask, how did he influence the look and feel of the story and the book itself?
I don't think necessarily with the look, but definitely the feel. He was a huge, huge inspiration for us. When we first watched Twin Peaks, it completely changed, I think, how we each wanted to tell a story. I think in that he did this really beautiful job of combining some of the scariest stuff I've ever seen on film and humor, a really weird sense of humor. I think our sense of humor is different, but we still try to combine both those things and how you wouldn't expect it, but they actually really complement each other really well. So I think the vibes of the story are similar, but we didn't want to too directly source his stuff necessarily.
Well, I think it was important for us. We're writing weird stories, and he wrote weird stories. And so you need to honor the past and you need to honor people who inspired you. And he inspired us a lot. And I think as a filmmaker, too, I'm inspired by him because he's so diverse. Everyone thinks of Twin Peaks or Mulholland Drive and like, oh, it's so weird. But, he also made The Elephant Man, which can make you cry. It's such a beautiful film. Or The Strait Story. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's the story of Alvin Strait, the man who rides across a few states on his John Deere tractor to go see his dying brother. And it is, like the title implies, just a straight story. It's about a man moving across America and seeing all the different people. And I think it's not just that Lynch is weird. I think it's that Lynch had real fondness and affection for humanity, and that stuff matters so much to us. So we wanted to put that thank you to him because even though we've never met him, he does feel like a friend, and we had to say goodbye to him.
And upon his death, I revisited all of his stuff. I'd have it on all the time while I was drawing. And I also realized, yeah, like you think about the darkness of his stuff, but how kind of like tender his stories are. I think that is also something that really inspired us, really matters to us that our kids care about each other and that like there's actual like real love in the story that I think Lynch did, I think better than anybody.
By the way, when he says our kids, he means the character. That is how we talk about the kids in the story as our kids.
Sure. Well, Kris, now that we've been talking about the secret of the saucer, I got to ask you what's next. Is there another Hobtown Mystery Story just waiting to be discovered?
That's right. We have a contract for 5 books, so the scripts for the 4th and the 5th are finished. Alex has already started on the 4th right now. It's called A Journey into the Abyss. I guess it's maybe is that the least silly title we've had? Case of the Missing Men, The Cursed Hermit,
It's
The Secret of the Saucer. Those all sound quite silly.
Yeah, it's the most ominous for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And we say it's like our 2 towers. It's our heroes separated in different parts of the world trying to get back to one another. And it's like Journey to the Center of the Earth is a big inspiration, especially the old movie, which was a big part of my life. But also, we actually have a copy right here. One of the illustrated classic editions from Moby Books, where every page is an illustration. I read these books over and over and over again. It's really an adventure story. So Hobtown crosses all different genres. And this one is 1 part adventure story and 1 part courtroom drama. And I know that sounds like they don't go together, but what we tried to do is have everything that's happening below the earth be as surreal and strange and bizarre as we could, and everything that's above ground is Still scary, still emotionally challenging. It's actually about a custody battle for one of the kids. It's about finding out who's going to take care of one of them. So those are the real life terrifying stakes above ground and below ground. Our heroes are finally trying to find Sam's father, who is lost somewhere in the abyss.
Something to look forward to, that's for sure. Well, gentlemen, those are all the questions I have for you, but I'm wondering, is there something I didn't ask that you'd like to get across in this interview?
For people who might be concerned as to whether or not they can just grab this, having not read the other ones, I would say for an astute reader, someone who likes a complex story, someone who likes a mystery, you can pick it up and you can read it cold, because the premise of the story is we don't know what's going on. It's a completely different world. All the characters are strewn about, all the alliances are broken, everything that we understand about ourselves, that the characters understand about themselves, is wrong or partially incorrect. And it's kind of a kaleidoscope whirlwind of mystery. And I think somebody could pick it up cold and enjoy it. I think I would. And I think you would.
I would. And
because we're making this for ourselves, obviously.
And if they do read it and enjoy it, I think it would make it even more fun for them to go back and read the first two and then to kind of understand. It would just contextualize things different. Like, I would be excited for the person who gets to do that because it's different from how I've experienced the story. So I think that they would enjoy it either way.
Thanks to Kris and Alex for taking time to chat with me. You can discover more about Kris Bertin at krisbertin.com and on Blue Sky at hobtown.bsky.social. And you can discover Alex Forbes on Instagram at Alexander J. Forbes. You can discover more about Hobtown Mystery Stories, The Secret of the Saucer, at onipress.com. And thank you for tuning in to the True North Country Comics podcast. I invite you to visit the True North Country Comics website to listen to even more conversations from creators about making comic books and graphic novels. I also encourage you to subscribe via the website so you'll be notified about new podcast interviews and article posts. This podcast is available wherever podcasts are enjoyed. Please like, follow, and subscribe. You can follow along True North Country Comics on most social media sites, and you're encouraged to send any and all feedback to John at truenorthcountrycomics.com. Thanks for tuning in, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2025.